The door slammed shut with a bang that seemed to echo through the entire neighborhood. She clutched the small suitcase with one hand and her rounded belly with the other, feeling the cold of the sidewalk seep through the worn soles of her shoes. Behind her, her mother-in-law's voice still reverberated. "We don't accept liars in this house." Her husband remained silent, eyes downcast, like someone abandoning a battle he never wanted to fight. She turned to the deserted street and for the first time in months allowed herself to cry without hiding her. Before we dive into the story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us. May this moment bring reflection and emotion. The morning had begun like so many others, silent, filled with glances that said more than any word. Clara carried the signs of 6 months of pregnancy in her body and the weight of an unbearable coexistence in her soul. The house that should have been her refuge had become a courtroom. Every gesture she made was judged, every word measured and returned with suspicion. Mrs. Beatrice, her mother-in-law, controlled everything. She decided the menu, the schedules, even the room temperature. Roderick, her husband, had ceased to be a partner and become a spectator. He silently agreed with his mother, nodding when she insinuated that Clara didn't deserve to. "Procedures exist to protect the family," Beatrice, as if that justified coldness. That morning, the air was even heavier. Clara went down for breakfast and found her mother-in-law seated at the head of the table, a white envelope before her. Roderick was beside her, avoiding his wife's gaze. "Sit down," Beatrice commanded, without lifting her eyes. Clara obeyed, feeling her heart race. Her mother-in-law opened the envelope with calculated movements and pulled out a printed sheet. It was a medical document, a paternity test requested without Clara's knowledge. "This proves you're not trustworthy," Beatrice declared, pushing the paper towards her daughter. "Roderick has the right to know the truth before it's too late." "But I never lied." His voice came out trembling but firm. "This baby is Roderick's son. Always has. Then why do you refuse to test now?" Accusatory. Clara took deep. "Because I don't need to. You should trust me." Beatrice stood up, haughty. "Trust is earned, and you lost ours the day you walked into this house." Roderick remained silent. Clara sought his eyes, pleading for support, but he turned his face. The silent betrayal hurt more than any accusation. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. I don't want any scandal. Just go." Clara went upstairs with trembling legs. In the bedroom, she threw clothes into a small suitcase, not quite understanding what was happening. 6 months earlier, that place represented the beginning of a new life. Now, humiliation. When she came down, Beatrice was waiting by the door with her arms crossed, Roderick behind her, like an obedient shadow. Clara looked at him one last time, hoping for some gesture, some word. Nothing came. "Procedures exist to protect the family," Beatrice. As she opened the door, Clara walked out, and the gate closed with a metallic sound that seemed definitive. The street received her with indifference. The sun was high. She felt cold. She walked aimlessly, feeling the weight of the suitcase and her helpless. Neighbors averted their gaze. Some closed their windows. Shame seemed to radiate from her like a warning. After 2 hours of walking her body, she sat on the sidewalk in front of an empty park and finally allowed herself. Tears came uncontrollably. She touched her belly, feeling the baby's movements in it. "I'm sorry for all of this." It was then that a familiar voice broke the silence. "Clara?" She looked up and saw a man standing before her. His features were familiar, but time had changed them. It took a few seconds to recognize him. "Leonard," he nodded, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" Clara tried to explain, but the words came out jumbled. Leonard didn't interrupt. He just listened, holding her hand gently. "Come with me," he said, helping her up. "You're not going to stay on the street." She hesitated, but had no strength to refuse. Leonard took the suitcase and guided her to a car parked nearby. The simplicity of the gesture contrasted with the complexity of the pain Clara carried. For the first time on that endless day, she felt that maybe she wasn't completely alone. The car drove through familiar streets until it stopped in front of a small house with a faded blue gate. Leonard opened the door and invited her in. The interior was modest, old but clean furniture, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said, showing her a back room. "It's not much, but it's..." Clara sat on the bed and finally allowed fatigue to overcome. Leonard left her to rest and prepare something. Meanwhile, Clara looked out the window and saw the sky beginning to darken. She touched her belly again and thought that perhaps this was the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. But she still didn't know what the cost of this transition would be. The first few days at Leonard's house brought Clara a strange sense of provisional. He didn't ask invasive questions, didn't demand explanations. He simply cared, with a kindness she hadn't experienced in a long time. He prepared meals, made sure she rested, and at night, when silence settled, he told stories of their shared childhood. Clara began to remember. Leonard had been her neighbor for years, a shy boy who always defended her from school bullies. When she moved away at 15, they lost contact. Now, decades later, he reappeared as an improbable angel. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, one afternoon while they were having tea on the small porch. Leonard smiled, but there was an old sadness in that smile. "Because I promised. Remember that time you fell off the wall and broke your arm?" Clara nodded affirmatively. "It was a distant but vivid memory. I said that if you ever needed me, I'd be around. I never forgot." The simplicity of the answer disarmed Clara. She felt her eyes well up, but not with sadness. It was gratitude mixed with something she couldn't yet name. Meanwhile, across town, Beatrice's house was buzzing with tension. Roderick wandered through the rooms like a ghost, unable to concentrate on any activity. His mother, for her part, was determined to control the narrative. Beatrice called a family meeting. Aunts, cousins, even close neighbors were summoned to hear her version of events. She presented the envelope with the paternity test request as irrefutable proof of Clara's betrayal. She refused to take the test, Beatrice declared, her voice heavy with rehearsed indignation. What would an honest woman have to hide? Roderick, sitting in the corner of the room, remained silent. Some relatives nodded in agreement, others remained quiet, uncomfortable with the exposure. But Beatrice's narrative was convincing. Clara was the villain, the intruder who had tried to deceive the family. She left because she wanted to. Beatrice, we just gave her the opportunity to do the right thing. The story spread. In a few days, neighbors murmured. Some people called Roderick, offering support. Others, more discreet, distanced themselves, suspicious that there was more behind that version. But not everything was under control. Mr. Augustus, the elderly neighbor who lived next door to Beatrice's house, observed everything with growing discomfort. He had witnessed Clara's expulsion. He had seen the mother-in-law pushing her daughter-in-law out, had heard the accusation, and, more importantly, he had recorded everything. Augustus kept a security camera pointed at the street. On the day of the expulsion, the equipment had captured audio and video. He watched the recording several times, feeling the moral weight of possessing that evidence. For weeks, he didn't want to get involved in other people's family disputes, but his conscience wouldn't let him. Meanwhile, Clara began to regain her strength. Leonard encouraged her to go out, to walk around the neighborhood, to resume small habits that would restore her autonomy. On one of these walks, they passed a community center. A poster on the door announced, "Support meeting for women in vulnerable situations." Clara stopped, reading the notice carefully. Leonard noticed her interest. "Want to go in?" She hesitated but nodded. Inside, they found a group of women sitting in a circle, sharing experiences. Some cried, others remembering their triumph. The coordinator, a middle-aged woman named Sonia, invited Clara to sit down. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but know that you are welcome here." Clara listened to stories. Some were so similar to hers, a shiver. She realized she wasn't alone. At the end of the meeting, Sonia approached. "If you need help, we have a support net. Volunteer lawyers, social workers. You don't have to face this alone." Clara thanked her, but wasn't ready to take that step yet. She returned to Leonard's house with her head buzzing with thoughts. For the first time, she considered the possibility of not just surviving, but fighting. That night, Leonard prepared a simple dinner. As they ate, he commented, "You know you have rights, right? What they did to you wasn't right." Clara looked at him, surprised by his frankness. "I know, but I don't have the strength to face that family." "Then find the strength," Leonard with unusual firmness. "Not for you, for your child." The words echoed in Clara's mind all night. She touched her belly, feeling the baby's movements, and realized Leonard was right. She couldn't allow herself to give up, but she still needed proof, something concrete to dismantle the farce built by Beatrice, and, unbeknownst to her, that proof already existed, stored in the house of a silent neighbor, waiting for the right moment to come to light. The turning point began unexpectedly on a Saturday morning. Clara woke with a strange feeling, as if the air had changed density. Leonard was in the kitchen in coffee when the doorbell rang. He opened the door and found Mr. Augustus, Beatrice's neighbor, standing on the stoop with a grave expression. "I need to speak with the young lady." Holding a USB drive in his trembling hand, Clara appeared in the living room, intrigued. Augustus entered, declined the invitation to sit, and went straight to the point. "I saw what they did to you, and I have the proof." He extended the USB drive. Leonard connected it to the computer, and the three watched in silence. The recording was clear. Beatrice pushing Clara out, Roderick passively watching, the mother-in-law yelling accusations while her daughter-in-law tried to defend herself. The audio had captured every word, every inflection of voice. Clara felt her legs weaken. This was the truth materialized, irrefutable. "Why did you wait so long?" she asked, her voice. Augustus lowered his eyes. "I was scared. That family has influence in the neighborhood, but I haven't been able to sleep properly since that day. This belongs to you." Leonard hugged Clara as she cried, but this time they weren't tears of defeat. It was the relief of someone who finally possessed a weapon against injustice. "What do I do with this?" Clara asked, wiping her face. "You use it," Leonard replied. "Contact the community center coordinator. She'll know what to do." The next day, Clara returned to the center. Sonia watched the recording with a serious expression, shaking her head in disapproval. At the end, "This changes everything. I'll forward it to our legal team. You need to file a formal complaint." The proceedings began. Volunteer lawyers took on the documents were filled out. Witnesses. Clara's story began to circulate in spheres Beatrice never imagined reaching. Advocate, social assistance network, even local media showed interest. Beatrice, accustomed to controlling narrative, found herself losing ground. Roderick received a court summons requesting clarification. He tried to talk to his mother, but she refused to admit any error. "This is persecution," Beatrice shouted, tearing up the papers. "That woman wants to destroy us." But the truth has its own weight. The video leaked, circulating in message groups. Neighbors who had previously supported Beatrice began to question. Some distanced themselves. Others, embarrassed, sought out Clara to apologize. Meanwhile, Clara discovered a strength she didn't know she had. In community center meetings, she began to share her story. Other women identified with her, offered support. Some revealed similar experiences, creating a network of solidarity. Sonia noticed Clara's potential. "You have a talent for this. You know how to speak, how to listen. Have you thought about helping other women when all this is over?" Clara smiled, an idea beginning to germinate. But first, she needed to close this. The moral judgment of Roderick's family was still to come. The tension reached its peak when Beatrice attempted a last-ditch effort. She hired a lawyer to draft a document discrediting the recording, alleging invasion of privacy. The argument was flimsy, but enough to delay the process. Clara felt discouragement set in. It seemed that with every victory, a new obstacle arose. Leonard, sensing her frustration, made a decision. "I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago." The next morning, Leonard posted a detailed account on social media, telling Clara's story without revealing names, but with enough details for those close to recognize the individuals involved. The text was strained but firm, appealing to empathy and justice. Within hours, it went viral. Comments accumulated. Some criticized the exposure, but most expressed indignation at the situation. The case gained visibility. A local radio show invited Clara for an interview. She hesitated, but Sonia encouraged her. "Your voice matters, and it can help other women." Clara accepted. In the interview, she spoke with serenity, without bitterness, but with clarity. She described the humiliation, the helplessness, and the renewed hope. She didn't mention names, but the narrative was powerful. Listeners called in, shared similar stories, offered support. Roderick heard the interview in his car, returning from work. For the first time, he understood the magnitude of what he had done, or rather, what he had failed to do. That night, he confronted his mother. "We need to stop this. What we did was wrong." Beatrice looked at her son with contempt. "You've always been weak, just like your father." The comparison hurt, but it also liberated him. Roderick realized he had spent his entire life trying to please a woman incapable of unconditional love. For the first time, he made his own decision. "I'm going to find Clara, and I'm going to apologize." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "She'll never forgive you." "It doesn't matter, Roderick. I need to." But before he could act, a new twist shook everyone. An anonymous envelope arrived at Clara's lawyer's office. Inside were copies of messages exchanged between Beatrice and Roderick, planning the expulsion weeks before it happened. The conversations revealed premeditation, calculated coldness. Clara read the message and felt a mixture of anger. This confirmed that the rejection hadn't been impulsive. It had been a strategy. Beatrice had orchestrated everything to rid her son of a commitment that, in her view, was inconvenient. The additional evidence sealed the fate of the case. The lawyers filed a more robust lawsuit, demanding not only compensation, but also protective measures and a public retraction. The community center auditorium was packed. Sonia had organized a public meeting to discuss Clara's case, not as an informal court, but as a space of collective reflection. The idea was to set a precedent, to show that the community could take a stand against injustice. Clara sat in the first row, next to Leonard. Mr. Augustus occupied a nearby seat, nervous but present. On the other side of the room, Roderick entered alone, head bowed. Beatrice did not attend. Sonia opened the meeting with thoughtful words. "We are here not to condemn, but to understand, to learn, and to ensure that stories like Clara's don't repeat themselves." Witnesses were called. Augustus presented the recording again, this time to a larger audience. The silence in the room was heavy. Some people wiped away tears. Others shook their heads, incredulous. One of the volunteer lawyers, Dr. Renato, took the floor. He brought data, similar cases filed, patterns of institutionalized abuse, statistics on pregnant women expelled from their homes. The coldness of the numbers contrasted with the human warmth of Clara's story. "When we analyze the records," Renato said, "we see that this is not an exception. It's a symptom. Families who use procedures, rules, protocols as weapons of control, who transform the home into a space of oppression." He paused, looking at Roderick and the silent one. "Those who witness but do not act. They are complicit. Omission is not neutrality. It is complicity." Roderick said even further. Sonia invited him to speak, but he merely shook his head, unable to articulate words. It was then that Leonard stood up. He wasn't scheduled to speak, but Sonia nodded, allowing him to. "I met Clara when we were children," Leonard began, his voice firm but emotional. "She was always courageous. She defended the weaker ones, questioned injustice, and yet, even being who she is, she was broken. Not by fate, but by human choices, deliberate choices." He looked at Roderick. "But I also believe in redemption. I believe that people can change, not to erase the past, but to build a different future." Leonard's speech struck a chord in the room. Murmurs of agreement echoed. Sonia seized the moment. "Clara, would you like to say something?" Clara stood up, took a deep breath. She touched her belly, feeling the baby move, and began. "I didn't come here seeking revenge. I came seeking dignity. When they expelled me, it wasn't just a door that closed. It was a part of me that died. The part that believed family was synonymous with shelter." Scanning the room. "But I discovered something. Family isn't who shares blood. It's who shares compassion. Leonard took me in. Mr. Augustus defended me. You, here, listen to me. This is family." Some applauded. Clara continued. "Procedures exist to protect people, not to humiliate them. When we turn rules into weapons, we lose our humanity." She looked at Roderick. "I don't know if you will change, but I hope so. Not for me, for your child, because he deserves a father who chooses what's right, not what's convenient." Roderick finally lifted, tears streaming down. He stood up, his trembling. "I failed. I failed as a husband, as a man, as a human being. I have no excuse. I only feel shame." He walked towards Clara, stopping a few feet. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I will take responsibility for the baby, financially, in every possible way." Clara didn't answer immediately. She simply nodded, accepting the retraction without embracing it. Forgiveness might come, perhaps, but reconciliation would not. The meeting continued. Other cases were discussed. Support protocols were formalized. The community center committed to creating a permanent assistance program. Sonia announced that Clara would be invited to co-coordinate the initiative. At the end, Mr. Augustus approached Clara. "Thank you for giving me courage. Doing the right thing is scary, but it's worth it." Clara hugged the elderly man, feeling the fragility of his bones, but also the moral strength that radiated from him. Leonard waited at the exit. When Clara approached, he asked, "How are you?" "Tired, but whole." They walked in silence to the car. On the way back, Clara looked out the window and noticed something she hadn't seen in months: hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically resolve itself, but the matured hope of someone who knows that the fight is worth it. The birth happened 3 weeks later. On a spring morning, Clara felt the first contractions at dawn. Leonard took her to the hospital, holding her hand the entire way. Sonia arrived minutes later, bringing flowers. Mr. Augustus sent a message, wishing her strength. Roderick also appeared, hesitant, waiting outside. Clara, upon learning of his presence, asked him to come in, not because she had completely forgiven him, but because their child deserved for his father to witness. The delivery was smooth. When the baby cried for the first time, Clara felt something reorganize within her. It was as if all the pains of the past months found meaning in that. She held her son in her arms, looked at his still reddish face, and whispered, "You will grow up knowing that love is a choice, and I choose you, always." Leonard watched the doorway, smiling discreetly. Roderick cried openly. Clara allowed him to hold the baby a few moments. He trembled, as if holding something sacred and fragile. "God, thank you, Roderick, for letting me be here." Clara simply nodded. Some wounds heal, but the scars remain. Was okay. In the following months, Clara took on the co-coordination of the support program at the community center. The work was demanding, but gratifying. She helped other women navigate bureaucratic processes, find shelter, and regain self-esteem. Each story echoed hers, but was also unique. Leonard remained present. He became the baby's godfather, constant and serene presence. Clara realized that something was growing between them, but it was different from what she had experienced with Roderick. Slower, more conscious. It was love-built, not just felt. Beatrice never sought Clara. She sold the house to another city. Some say she started attending support groups with parents, trying to understand her own mistakes. Others claim she simply disappeared, unable to deal with the shame. Roderick kept his promises. He paid child support on time, visited his son regularly. He and Clara maintained a cordial relationship focused on the child's well-being. It wasn't friendship, but it was respect. The community center grew. Clara's story inspired donations, volunteers, institutional partnerships. The small space expanded, occupying an entire building. Sonia retired, passing the coordination to Clara and other collaborators. One afternoon, Clara was organizing documents when she found the USB drive that Augustus had given her months earlier. She watched the recording again, this time without crying. She realized that the humiliated woman on the screen was no longer her, or rather, it was, but transformed. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had been reinterpreted. She put the USB drive in a box, along with other symbolic objects, the envelope with the messages, the baby's first photo, a letter from Roderick apologizing, not to forget them, but to remind her of the path she had traveled. Leonard appeared at the door, bringing coffee, thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I had nothing. Today, I have everything that matters. He smiled. You built this with your choices. Clara agreed. Procedures exist to protect people. But in the end, it's individual choices that define who we are. She had chosen not to surrender. She had chosen to fight, to embrace, to forgive without forgetting. She had chosen to transform pain into purpose, and that choice made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments how you would react to an injustice like this. Your voice matters, and every shared story strengthens our community. Carry forward what the truth asked of you today, the courage to choose what's right, even when it's difficult. Until the next journey.